In the quiet, close-knit community of Wheelerfield in St. Thomas, Jamaica, everyone knew O'Neill. To most he was simply Day, a name spoken with familiarity and warmth. He was a constant and reassuring presence, a man woven into the very fabric of daily life. O'Neill was not a man of great wealth or high station, but his value to the community was immeasurable. He was the kind of neighbor who always had a ready smile, a helping hand, or a word of encouragement for those who needed it. His spirit was as much a part of the landscape as the lush green hills that surrounded his home. He embodied the spirit of community, a living example of what it means to be a good neighbor in a place where everyone knows your name and your story. O'Neill's favorite mode of transport was his bicycle. It was more than just a way to get around, it was a symbol of his simple, grounded life. He could often be seen pedaling along the familiar roads of Wheelerfield, particularly in the bamboo lawn area. His presence on that bike was a daily ritual, a moving landmark that people had come to expect and cherish. He would ride with a quiet purpose, whether heading to the local shop, visiting a friend, or simply enjoying the warm Jamaican air. The sight of O'Neill on his bicycle was a comforting one, a sign that all was well in their small corner of the world. It represented a peaceful rhythm, a steady beat in the heart of the community. He was a man deeply connected to his surroundings and the people within them. Children would wave as he passed and elders would call out greetings from their verandas. O'Neill knew the struggles and joys of his neighbors because he shared in them. In a world that often feels disconnected, he was a point of unity. His easygoing nature and genuine kindness made him a beloved figure, someone people felt they could trust and rely on. He was a repository of local knowledge and a friendly face in times of both celebration and hardship. This deep integration into the community made him not just a resident, but a true pillar of Wheelerfield, holding a special place in many hearts. The love for O'Neill was built on countless small acts of goodness over many years. It was in the way he would stop to help someone carry their heavy load, the patience he showed with the neighborhood youth, and the respect he gave to everyone he met, regardless of their age or status. He was a simple man leading a simple life, yet his impact was profound. The community of Wheelerfield did not just know O'Neill, they valued him, they respected him, and they loved him. He was one of their own, a cherished part of the collective family. This deep affection is what makes the story of his final moments so incredibly painful and difficult for everyone to comprehend. The day the tragedy occurred began like any other in Wheelerfield. The sun cast its warm glow over bamboo lawn, and life moved at its usual unhurried pace. O'Neill was out on his bicycle, a familiar sight for everyone. He was navigating the roads he knew so well, a place where he should have been safest, surrounded by the familiar faces of his community. No one could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold in broad daylight. The ordinary nature of the moment stood in stark contrast to the brutal act that would shatter the peace forever, turning a scene of everyday life into one of unimaginable violence and sorrow. The air was calm, but a storm of human cruelty was about to break. Suddenly, the peaceful scene was violently interrupted. A vehicle, driven with shocking intent, headed directly for O'Neill. The driver was not a stranger. In a twist that defies all understanding, the person behind the wheel was his own son. The vehicle struck O'Neill with brutal force, knocking him from his bicycle and onto the hard pavement. The act was swift, deliberate, and utterly shocking. It was a moment of betrayal of the deepest kind, a son turning against his own father in the most public and violent way imaginable. The sound of the impact echoed through the community, a sound that would haunt the witnesses for the rest of their lives. This was not a hidden crime committed under the cover of darkness. It happened in the open, for all to see. Many people from the community were present at Bamboo Lawn. They were going about their daily business, chatting with neighbors, or simply watching the world go by. They became unwilling witnesses to a patricide. They saw the vehicle, they saw O'Neill on his bike, and they saw the horrific moment of impact. Their eyes registered the unbelievable truth: a son had just struck down his father. The public nature of the crime added another layer of trauma, as the community was forced to witness an act that should be unthinkable. The immediate aftermath was one of stunned silence, quickly followed by cries of disbelief and horror. People rushed towards O'Neill, but the damage was done. The man they knew as Day, the friendly face on the bicycle, lay motionless. The sight of the beloved community member, so full of life just moments before, now a victim of such a heinous act, was too much for many to bear. The fact that his own flesh and blood was the perpetrator sent a shockwave of confusion and deep-seated pain through everyone who saw it. The tragedy was not just the loss of a man but the violent severing of the most sacred bond of all. The news of O'Neill's death and the manner in which it happened spread through Wheelerfield and the wider St. Thomas parish like a wildfire. The initial reaction was one of pure shock. People simply could not process the information. How could this happen? How could a son commit such a terrible act against his own father and in such a public way? Conversations stopped mid-sentence in shops and on street corners as the grim details were shared. The community was collectively paralyzed by a sense of disbelief. The incident felt like a nightmare from which they desperately wished to wake, a grotesque story that belonged somewhere else, not in their peaceful community. As the initial shock began to subside, it was replaced by a profound and heavy grief. The loss of O'Neill alone would have been a sad event, but the circumstances magnified the sorrow 100-fold. He was not just gone, he was violently taken by a person who should have protected him. Tears flowed freely, not just from his close friends and family, but from people all over the community who felt his loss personally. The familiar sight of his bicycle was now a painful reminder of the emptiness he left behind. The entire community of Wheelerfield was plunged into a state of mourning, their collective heart broken by the brutality and the betrayal. For those who witnessed the event at Bamboo Lawn, the trauma was particularly acute. They replayed the horrific scene in their minds, the image of O'Neill being struck burned into their memories. Many struggled to sleep, haunted by what they had seen. They felt a mixture of anger, helplessness, and deep sadness. They had witnessed the ultimate violation of family and community trust. The public display of violence left a deep psychological scar on them, turning a familiar public space into a site of trauma. The witnesses were not just onlookers. They were now carriers of a terrible burden, a memory that would forever change their perception of safety and human nature. Anger also began to simmer beneath the surface of the community's grief. The senselessness of the act fueled a quiet rage. Why did this happen? What could lead a son to such a dark place? Questions circulated, but there were no easy answers. This anger was directed not only at the perpetrator but also at the broader issue of violence that could fester within a family, hidden from view until it explodes in the most devastating way. The community felt a sense of injustice, a feeling that something sacred had been desecrated. The shocking crime forced them to confront a darkness they never imagined existed so close to home. The tragic story of O'Neill is a painful illustration of how violence within the family unit can ripple outward, causing devastation to an entire community. A family is supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of safety, love, and support. When that sanctuary is violated, the very foundation of society is shaken. The bond between a parent and child is one of the most fundamental human connections. Its violent rupture sends a message that no one is truly safe. This incident in St. Thomas serves as a stark reminder that the conflicts that happen behind closed doors can spill out onto the streets with deadly consequences, leaving scars on everyone. We must use this moment of collective sorrow to reflect on the state of our families in Jamaica. We must ask ourselves the hard questions. Are we creating environments where anger and conflict are allowed to grow into uncontrollable rage? Are we providing the necessary support for individuals and families who are struggling with deep-seated issues? O'Neill's death cannot be in vain. It must serve as a catalyst for change, a wake-up call to address the underlying problems that lead to such horrific outcomes. We must foster a culture where seeking help is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness, and where disputes are resolved with words, not with violence. In honoring O'Neill's memory, we must do more than just mourn his passing. We must commit to building stronger, more peaceful families. This means better communication, more empathy, and greater access to mental health and conflict resolution resources. It means neighbors looking out for one another and creating communities where people feel supported enough to ask for help before a crisis point is reached. The peace we seek on our streets must begin in our homes. It is our shared responsibility to ensure that no other family and no other community has to endure the kind of pain that Wheelerfield is feeling today. Let the memory of O'Neill, the man known as Day who rode his bicycle with a gentle spirit, inspire us to action. Let his life and his tragic death fuel a renewed commitment to ending violence within our families. Let us work tirelessly to create a Jamaica where the bond between parent and child is unbreakable, where love triumphs over hatred, and where every community is a place of peace and safety for all its members. Rest in peace, O'Neill. Your community will never forget you, and your story will serve as a powerful call for a better, more peaceful future.